In 1190 BC, dawn breaks over Karnak. With your camera in hand, you stand where visitors do today, gazing at columns that, piercing the heavens like prayers made of stones. You witness majesty, civilization, and divine labor. However, in 1923, archaeologists discovered something in the lowest chamber of the temple beneath your feet that caused them to halt their work for 3 days. Even in the light of a lamplight, a piece of limestone that has been purposefully and covertly carved into its surface is hardly noticeable. Dozens of child-sized handprints were pushed into wet plaster along a corridor that led nowhere. Small fingers, desperate pressure, and next to them, a single phrase repeated 17 times in clumsy hieratic script, the casual writing of simple people that we are not heard by Mut. Mut is the mother goddess, guardian of the innocent, and protector of children. Why would kids who were devoted to her, the Holy Mother herself, carve a message stating that she was incapable of hearing them? From 3,000 years away, what were they attempting to convey to us? These females were blessed, according to the priest. The official documents, smooth-polished stone inscriptions painted in lapis and gold, referred to them as pure ones, divine brides, and selected by the gods. Beautiful phrases, yet often the most exquisite words conceal the most repulsive realities. Margaret Murray, a British archaeologist, was excavating the Temple of Mut's basement archives at Leeksaw in 1923. Routine tasks like measuring foundation stones and cataloging pottery fragments. Then, in a storage chamber that had not been used in more than 2 millennia, she discovered a sealed, unadorned clay jar that had been purposefully concealed behind a false wall. She attempted to present her results to the Egyptian Antiquities Service in 17 papyrus letters. They classified the contents and seized the jar. 3 eminent Egyptologists who had dedicated their lives to translating texts from temples declined to work on it. In his journal, one person wrote, "Some truths are better left buried." For 71 years, the jar and its contents are kept sealed in a warehouse near Cairo. What did those letters contain? And why did those who read them wish they hadn't? Look, you're at the proper spot if you believe that recorded history is more important than cozy fantasies. We can access archives, translate primary documents, and resurrect voices like this with each subscription to Crimson Historians. Press that button, then let's go back because what transpired next was worse than you could have imagined. Egypt, New Kingdom era, 1550 to 1077 BC. The Golden Age, the pinnacle of power. You've watched the films. The king's divine prerogative and grandeur. Here's what museums don't tell you, though. Egyptian temples were more than just places of worship. They were businesses. In addition to managing 83 ships, controlling 81,000 workers, and owning 421,000 livestock, the Temple of Ammon at Karnak possessed more land than the pharaoh. These figures come from the Wilbur Papyrus, which is currently housed in the Brooklyn Museum. You are welcome to visit it. Examine the meticulousness with which ancient accountants listed assets, such as inventory. They were not holy men, the priests. They were landowners who spoke the names of God. This is how the system operated. A farmer borrows money from the temple. Grain for planting, copper for tools. The priests grin. They claim that the gods supply. The interest increases, consistently favoring the temple. The first harvest was insufficient to pay the obligation. Next year, still insufficient. The priests arrive in the 3rd year. The amount owed has increased. There are 3 choices for the farmer. Forfeit his land, devote his daughter to debt slavery, or enslave his entire family for generations. The priests speak in more gentle terms. She will reside in the divine's home. She will be quite fortunate. The official title was Hum and Tyre, which means servant of the god, practical reality, and life of unpaid labor. Archaeologists discovered contracts, real legal documents, and dads signing over daughters in the workers' town of Deir el-Medina. It states, in year 3 of Ramesses IX, the farmer Amanhi, being unable to repay 15 daimon of copper, does give his daughter Neferti to the house of Ammon for perpetual service. Neferti was 9 years old. Her age, village, debt amount, and other details are listed in the contract. Everything is itemized, lawful, and attested. Her child exchanged 15 deben of copper, or almost 3 months' worth of pay. Here's what doesn't make sense, though. These girls weren't performing manual labor. Many received instruction in reading and writing, skills that 90% of Egyptians would never acquire. Some became Ammon's wives of God. They oversaw temple finances, had hundreds of servants under their direction, donned gold, and had opulent lives filled with money, power, and education. Why, therefore, are there handprints in secret passageways? Why is that message etched 17 times and Mut does not hear us? Why were secret letters detailing things the priests never recorded in Margaret Murray's jar? There is a discrepancy. What the priests referred to as purification holds the key to the solution that if the idea of a 9-year-old being given away like property doesn't make you want to recall her name, then history has already forgotten about her. Keep it from happening. We are here for that reason. Remain with me. 1896 Flinders Petrie, a British archaeologist, unearths a priest's tomb at Abydos. A handbook with instructions for temple initiation rites was found inside a papyrus scroll. Currently, the document is housed in the British Museum. Middle Egyptian Procedural, Catalog number EA100042 Clinical is similar to a furniture assembly instruction handbook, except it's not furniture. The girl shall be bathed in the sacred pool on the day of her entry, the Torah states. In front of the Wab priests, her clothing must be taken off. Her physical purity will be assessed. That word was analyzed. Her hair shall be removed so that no impurity remains, the scripture goes on. She will take the oath in front of Armin. The God owns my body. His will is my will. She would be 8, 10, or even 12 years old, standing nude in front of adult men, reciting things she didn't comprehend, and legally committing herself to a life she didn't choose. This is where things get weird, though. Following initiation, these girls were granted access to hallowed regions of the temple that were off-limits to even aristocrats. They studied astronomy, mathematics, and music in addition to handling ceremonial artifacts. According to one Karnak inscription, Nefertiti was the chief of the harem of Ammonius, overseeing 300 servants and managing temple finances. Strength but no liberty. They were unable to leave the temple grounds, but they were able to manage treasuries. Couldn't write to their families, but they could read hieroglyphs that had authority over servants but was unable to refuse requests from priests. Danish archaeologist Lisa Manika was researching broken pottery shards that the ancient Egyptians used as notepads at Temple Ostra in the 1960s. She discovered dozens of medical prescriptions for young women in temples, including instructions for midwives caring for girls as young as 11 during childbirth, treatments for genital injuries, and ways to avoid coerced conception. One Ostrakhan says, grind acacia leaves with honey for the girl who bleeds after the god's visitation. Put it on the wound and cover it with fresh linen. They referred to it as the god's visitation. Maniki discovered something different among the prescriptions. A letter with handwriting that slants as if the writer was trembling, written on shattered pottery. I apologize for giving you to my sister, Mutmia, who works in Mut's home. I apologize for believing the priest when he predicted your blessing. Every night your mother sobs. I don't get any sleep. Please pardon me. It's not signed. The daughter did not respond. Mail could not be sent by temple employees. But hold on, before you presume that everyone was horrified by this. It wasn't that easy. There were women in temples who actually held governmental authority. Hatshepsut began as a god's bride of Ammon before rising to become pharaoh and ruling Egypt for 20 years. As adults, other women willingly went inside temples in search of instruction that was unavailable elsewhere. Protection against forced marriage. What, then, was the difference? What kept the girls carving frantic messages in secret passageways apart from the strong priestesses? The solution is in one word that is hardly ever stated aloud in official records. The sealed jar of Margaret Murray. The 1923 one. It includes 17 letters written by Tentipit, a woman who worked for 40 years at the Mut temple. She talks about something the priests did each month in them. She refers to it as the monthly selection. Tentipit wrote it down, and what she wrote remained buried in that jar for 3,000 years, but the official temple records, carved in stone and coated in gold, never explain what that meant. University College London is home to Margaret Murray's personal notes. You can make a request, complete a form, wait 3 weeks, and then have a librarian deliver a box to you while you sit in a quiet reading area. The March 12th entry in her journal from the 1923 excavation season. Today, a sealed jar was discovered in the southern storage chamber's artificial wall. Clay is purposefully buried and unadorned at I in the field tent. I opened it. Inside is papyrus. Letters. So far I've read 3. I wish I hadn't. Harrison and Blackman were shown the translations on March 15th. They both declined to go on. Some truths are better left buried, Harrison remarked. As if that's important, as if money is more important than reality. Although the letters were written in late New Kingdom Demotic writing, the Egyptian Antiquities Service confiscated the jar, categorized the contents, and declared them to be probably frauds. For 71 years, the letters were classified. In 1994, they were eventually made available. The majority of Egyptologists have yet to read them. Instead of using the formal hieroglyphs of monuments, the letters were written in demotic, the casual cursive writing employed for private correspondence, which is the handwriting of an individual writing for themselves and the truth. Tentapet's account. I was selected for the monthly rite in my 12th year of service. I had witnessed other girls being selected before me. Every time, they came back silent and altered. Following the evening offerings, they led us to the inner sanctum. That month, there were 5 of us. The youngest was 8 years old. She sobbed. She was struck by the overseer, who claimed that tears were defilement. The mask of Ammon, goldface, and ram's horns was worn by the high priest. He claimed that our bodies were receptacles for God's delight, that God would communicate through him, and that we were fortunate to receive the divine seed. This was holy, he remarked. In her notes, Murray wrote, the account describes systematic abuse disguised as religious duty, organized, scheduled, recorded in administrative logs like grain inventory. Because that is its genuinely nasty genius. This was not anarchy. It was well planned. Rotation schedules are displayed in Medinet Habu temple records. Girls are mentioned by name along with their ages and service dates indicated by marks. 7 years old was the youngest age ever reported. Nor an error, nor an anomaly. Policy. There were other writers besides Tentapet. There were more letters in the JAR.IT had been discovered by other women. This secret ship in an overlooked storage area. And included their personal testimonies. My name was Merit, one person wrote. Prior to them altering it for me. Grain was what my father owed. He was informed by the priest that he would wed the god. It meant honor, in his opinion. I was 11 years old. This place is devoid of God. The only people who claim to speak for gods are masked men. I have also served for 16 years. To the god, I have given birth to 3 children. They took each one. From me after 3 years. My eldest daughter now serves as I do. See her in the morning processions. She does not look at me. I think they told her I am. Murray's diary. March 15, 1923. I've read several things today that make me wonder if I should keep studying Egyptology. They were kids. This was organized, documented, and controlled. And for 200 years, experts have referred to these temples as hallowed. Do you recall those handprints? The ones in the dead-end hallway beneath the Mut temple were pounded into damp plaster. They were explained in Tentapet's letters. Girls were led through that narrow, dark path when they were initially brought to the temple for initiation. Press your hands here against the wall, the monks instructed them. Beyond this boundary, you are reborn. This is where your former self perishes. The females put their hands into the damp plaster. Kids are terrified, perplexed, and following instructions. However, years later, some girls would return to that corridor, the only area of the temple without security patrols. After making 3 efforts to flee, they would then press their hands once more. The same wall, the same location, but now the hands are older, bigger, and more forceful. They would also carve next to them. We are not heard by Mut. Hold on. Not a message to whoever may find it, a witness statement, or a prayer. We were authentic. We were real. We experienced this. Here's what makes this much more sinister, though. Everything was recorded by the priests. They meticulously documented all births, deaths, and services provided. With the same bureaucratic efficiency that they used to count grain inventories, they wrote about the girls' dedication and purity. One Karnak administrative document states, Year 7, 3rd month of flooding, day 12. In the inner sanctuary, God blessed 5 new servants of Ammon. God was happy. God was pleased with the 5 new servants, whose ages were not specified. They wrote it down out of religious obligation rather than guilt. They sincerely thought they were doing the God's bidding that you're carrying this now if you've made it this far. Murray performed the same thing in 1923. Just like those girls did 3,000 years ago. This video can be closed. You don't need to remember watching it. Alternatively, you can become a subscriber to Crimson Historians and assist us in ensuring that these voices, the ones they attempted to hide in archives and seal in jars, never again go unheard. That's the option. Make it. Something had altered by the late New Kingdom, circa 1100 BC. God's wife of Ammon's status changed. Princesses, royal women, and pharaoh's daughters were the only ones allowed to attend, and they had to abstain from sexual activity. No divine partnerships, no marriage, and no children. Why has this changed? One of the longest papyri ever discovered, the Harris Papyrus, was composed by Ramesses III in 1150 BC and is currently housed in the British Museum. He discusses changes to temple administration in it. He speaks cautiously about the impurities that had tarnished the heavenly order and the abuses that had tainted the hallowed buildings. He doesn't go into detail, but he reorganizes everything, altering who has access to whom and who can exercise power. According to Egyptologist Gay Robbins, this was a direct reaction to mounting abuse evidence. Complaints that even made it to the pharaoh's court. The answer? Add female members of royal families. Women in leadership have protection, education, and political clout. Women who were untouchable. Women have the ability to refuse. Ironically, the victims ended up being the answer. By 700 BC, Ammonius' wife was largely in charge of thieves. She was unmarried, celibate, and untouchable while leading armies, overseeing coffers, and possessing authority comparable to that of the pharaohs in Upper Egypt. A position of true authority that resulted from centuries of mistreatment. However, the circumstances of the lower-ranking temple girls only somewhat improved. Women at the top were safeguarded by the reforms, while everyone else was left behind. This is something that is rarely talked about. A lady who experienced it herself came up with some of the most important reforms. From 700 to 650 BC, Shepan-Weep II was God's wife of Ammon. She remained at the temple for 68 years after being dedicated to it at the age of 9. When she rose to power, she issued an edict that is still visible today on the north side of the Holy Lake. No female may enlist in the military before she is 15 years old. No priest should assert control over a person while doing ritualistic tasks. Allow her family to come see her 3 times a year. In disagreements, give her a voice. When they took her to the temple, she was 9 years old. She recalled the system that had harmed her, and she used her power to improve it in an imperfect, partial, but sincere way. Something unusual occurs in the archaeological record after 600 BC. The number of first-hand reports from temple employees is steadily declining. No more carved messages, concealed letters, or confessions on pottery shards. Did the abuse cease? Or did record-keeping simply become more regulated and centralized? Did women cease penning their truths? Or did someone ensure that such facts would never be discovered? For 71 years, Margaret Murray's sealed jar was classified. The majority of Egyptologists disregarded it when it was eventually published in 1994. Too complex, too uncomfortable, easier to write dissertations about architecture and theology, easier to admire the columns. Stand in the Hyperstyle Hall in Karnak today. An airline ticket is currently available for purchase. Explore the same hallways that those females used. Take a look at those 134 columns that point to heaven. Each one has stone fingers pointing to eternity, prayers, and hymns to the gods engraved into it. Isn't that lovely? Now keep in mind that all of the stones were placed by helpless hands. Every prayer was sung by voices that were unable to refuse. Each offering was made by those who were also offerings. We continue to do this. We erect monuments without considering the bones that support them. We disregard cost in favor of glory. It's simpler to refer to something as sacrosanct than to name it what it is. On March 18, 1923, Margaret Murray wrote in her unpublished journal, "Civilization is not measured by the height of its monuments, but by the depth of its compassion for those who had no choice but to build them." We haven't learned anything by that standard. How many of today's systems are concealed by lovely language? How many organizations defend the powerful while claiming divine authority? How often have you heard that cruelty is justified by tradition? Egypt's temples are no longer there. The design is timeless, but the priests are nothing more than dust. You've just seen one of the most terrible realities in history. Not because it was particularly wicked, but rather because it was so commonplace, well-organized, widely acknowledged, and well-recorded by individuals who believed they were carrying out sacred tasks. Subscribe to Crimson Historians if tales like this serve as a reminder of how frail humanity is and how readily we confuse abuse for honor, cruelty for tradition, and silence with consent. Because failing to recognize how the past is reflected in the present is the only thing more hazardous than forgetting the past. Finally, do you recall the letters from Tentapit? The 17 that were discovered in Murray's jar? 20 may fit in the jar. 3 are still unaccounted for. An antiquities trader in Cairo reportedly discovered them in 2003, claimed to know where they were and that they had been in a private collection since the 1920s. 3 days after disclosing the location, he passed away from a heart attack. According to Tentapit's index, which Murray translated before the Antiquities Service took the jar, those 3 letters contain names, specific names of priests, families who were aware of what was going on but chose to remain silent, and authorities who are paid to turn a blind eye. Those names are waiting somewhere in Egypt, buried under sand or concealed in a personal collection. Additionally, someone doesn't want them discovered. Even when we would prefer to forget, the stones remember.